There's a generosity that wants to be born, an abundance that is inching its way through our models of identity making, of justice seeking, and is spilling through us, finding its voice through our bodies this morning and throughout our time here. And yet this generosity is unspeakable. It's ineffable. It's beyond words and language at this point in time. I'd like you to exercise this beautiful invocation of slowing down in times of urgency by embracing the person next to you so tightly that you leave an imprint of your skin on that person's skin. Let's do that. Okay. Thank you. Where I come from a place in West Africa called Nigeria. And before we tell a story, there's only time to tell a story. I imagined I was going to talk about quantum indeterminacy and the climate solutions, the technicalities of trying to solve a global crisis. But there's no time for that, so I'm just going to tell a story, okay? So where I come from, before a story is told, there is an invitation to tell the story. Because storytelling and story listening are not two separate things. And so the storyteller calls out, "Hello," and then everyone says, "Hello." Okay, so I'm just going to do it now. Okay. Hold on a bit. So, hello. 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 Let's do it, okay? You initiated. But before I tell the story, I was on Whidbey Island 2 weeks ago in Washington State, Seattle. And I was in deep meditation with a Zen master friend of mine, staring at this big expanse of water. And as is usually the case during meditation, something occurred to me, a question. I didn't let it hold or linger, but I felt this is maybe something I would like to share after we're done. And the question was, can you count the number of waves on the ocean? And I shared that with my Zen master friend, and he said, "Aha, I'd like to offer an answer to that. I have an answer." And then he stretched out his hand like this, and flailing his limbs and curling his fingers and making some kind of gestures. And then he returned to his form. And I understood what happened before he even tried to explain. He said, maybe some questions don't want answers. Maybe some problems don't desire solutions. Maybe there's no real resolution to that. Maybe this is a koan, if you will, a riddle, something deeper than that can be met by the logic of a resolution. And in holding that, I wonder if there isn't a way of seeing what we rudely call climate change, climate collapse, climate chaos as a deeper riddle than any of the solutions we can throw at it can unravel. Is there a sense in noticing that what is happening to us around the world, whether it's fires, whether it's the lack of water in Chennai, whether it is the spill in the Niger Delta of Shell oil, maybe this is something so profound that we must meet it in a different kind of energy altogether. Something deeper than an answer, something deeper than a solution. And so I have some questions today. What if the way we respond to the crisis is part of the crisis? What if justice is getting in the way of transformation? What if a different kind of gesturing, responsivity is required in this time? Something deeper than a solution, because this is not just a simple causal relationship, a cause-effect relationship. Maybe something deeper is calling us into unprecedented kinds of organizations and relationships and gestures. And this wisdom that something deeper might be calling us has been held by African people for a long time in our cultural intelligences and techniques and practices, one of which is called a libation. Does anyone know what a libation is? Can I just see your hands up? You've heard of a libation. A libation is, I grew up watching libations. I didn't understand what it meant. I would see my father pour some wine to the ground, and I would think, what a perfect waste of wine. Why would you do that? And elders will pour drink to the floor, and they will mutter some words that I couldn't understand. And I always wanted to know, what are they doing? What's this all about? And I heard a story about why this happens to be the case, not just for Nigerians, not just for Wakandans, not just for Ghanaians or South Africans, but for most of Africa, the ritual of the libation, noticing water as prayer. This is the story, okay? So one more time. Hello? Hello? In old Egypt, it wasn't called Egypt then, it was called Kemet. There's a story of a god, the sun god Ra. And he was an old man who would get drunk every morning and just sit at the steps of his shame, drooling in his beard, and people would come by and just point at him and just say, look at the so-called noble. I don't know why I pointed at you, Charles. But look at the noble god Ra. Look at him in his divinity, just sitting there, drooling, wasting away. And so Ra got angry, and he threw a tantrum, and he decided to go back into the heavens. So he returned to the heavens, and he was still in his rage and outraged and angry and feeling like the whole world is falling apart. Something almost like what my brother Mauricio felt this morning. And then he called his daughter, who is also his mother, who is also his wife. Don't ask me how. Hathor is her name. Yeah, Hathor is her name. And Hathor comes and he says, I would want you to avenge me. Go to the realm of the mortals, to the human beings, and leave no stone unturned, leave no vein untapped. Drink their blood, destroy all of them in his rage. And Hathor said, yes, father, and husband, and son. Proceeds to earth and starts to do her work. Eats up everyone, leaves no stone unturned, and every day she would leave puddles of blood gleaming in the sunset, just everywhere. And she would drink that blood, and she would leave. And Ra looked down from the heavens and noticed, so this is what I would have liked to see happen, but maybe this is a bit too much, so maybe I just want to wrap things up. So Hathor, could you just, I'm fine now, I'm okay. But Hathor was so intent on this course of action that she did not stop, she did not give up, she kept on doing what she was doing. And so this is where the limitations of divinity showed up. God himself could not stop what is happening. He could not stop the fires from raging. And so the men and the women and the children prayed to Ra and said, help us, do something about it. And Ra said, I can't stop this myself. And so they met in council, in community. They all came together. And what do we do about Hathor? How do we stop Hathor? And then one of the community stood up and said, well, you gave the order to Hathor to drink the blood of human beings. Maybe we need to stop being human beings for that to work. How do we stop being human beings? Someone already caught into the frequency of that wisdom and said, aha, a trick. We need to trick Hathor. How do we trick Hathor? We need to change our blood. Maybe our blood becomes wine. And this became the trick. This became the intelligence of the community, that they will pour wine every morning on the ground. And they will pour it strong red wine, just in the places that they knew Hathor would descend from and start her eating cannibalistic campaign. And they will pour it every morning. And hopefully, this was the plan. She would drink of that blood, forget where she was, and then go away. As outrageous as that plan was, it worked. And Hathor would come, notice the blood. If I think straight, I imagine that I drank all the blood yesterday. Maybe this is some that I left behind, and she would drink it. And she would get really drunk, and then she would stumble off. As a result, the men and the women and the children and Ra decided this is something we need to continue forever. Hence the libation. When we pour the libation on the ground, it is a way of noticing the trickery that makes the universe work. That the world is made by the trickster. That the world is sustained by the trick, if you will. That we, like water, are homeless. Because if you notice anything about water and its entanglement and its fluidity and its porousness, it is that water is not at home with itself. Water is the embodiment of homelessness. It is fugitive. It is self-fugitivity, if you will. It is this invitation to deconstruct oneself over and over again. It is an invitation to shapeshift. It is an invitation to become other than what we are. It is an invitation to touch the porosity of our membranes, to shapeshift, to remember. And I mean remember not in the sense of just recalling a memory, but remembering, reconfiguring our members, if you will. I call that rememberment. This invitation to pour libation is not just to remember our ancestors, it is also to reconfigure ourselves. And I feel that in these times of climate chaos or climate collapse or carbon emissions, some different kind of response is needed. And so we're fighting. Right now in the world, there's a techno-bureaucratic political machine that is shuddering and is vibrating and is trying to produce solutions to the problems. Now, this is not to dismantle or dismiss or disparage all the solutions that we have, but it's to call into question the idea that this is not the time for us to sacrifice. This is not the time for us to fall apart like a seed and become something else. And this is the invitation that I want to leave us with, that maybe this is a time where the very concept of man is being deterritorialized. It's a big word, but it means we're being deconstructed. All the things we've taken for granted as ours, all the properties we felt were ours, identity, language, property, the property of consciousness, we're being invited to die. By pouring a libation, we're noticing the intricacy and the intimacy of demise with living well. We're noticing that dying is not the opposite of living, and that sometimes we have to hold the crisis close to us, like eating the body of God himself and being into a different place altogether and a different intelligence that might help us become other than human beings. So, I have just a couple of minutes left. I don't want to go through the technicalities of all the solutions that are being presented. But there is a different kind of invitation here today. I think the retreat of the glacial sheets in the Pleistocene, leaving us with the Holocene, this time where we built settlements, we developed language, we developed tools for building cities. Now the transience of nature is calling us into question. It's like the red carpet is being stripped from under us, and we're being invited to fall like seed into the earth. I think this is a time of demise. Strangely enough, the etymology of demise is the transference of property. That is a deep hospitality, a radical hospitality to a world that is wanting to defeat us. Like victory, if we win at this, we failed. Like the logic of mastery needs to be composted. And that is what is being invited. The logic of permanence, the logic of continuity. This is a radical discontinuity in the intelligence of becoming. And we're being invited into that place. So how do we slow down? When my people say the times are urgent, let us slow down. They're not saying be slow, literally, like it's a function of speed. They're inviting a different kind of awareness. They're helping us notice the insurgency of the invisible. That is what we've invisibilized, what we've turned apart, what we've pushed aside and made, a byproduct of our exclusive search for progress. They're inviting something different altogether. And so the obstacle will not be pushed away, is what my people tell me, what my wisdoms derived from the breasts that I'm sucking today, the milk that I'm drawing, the worlds that cradle me, invite me to notice, and I invite you to notice that as well, to dwell with that, to stay with the trouble of that just a little while longer, that we will not come out of this intact. Just like water is poured to the ground, we're coming down to earth, and we will not arrive intact. There is a diffraction that needs to happen. There is a dying to self that needs to happen. And by self, I don't mean the personal, individualized capitalist unit that is supposedly encased in this fleshly abode. I don't mean that. I mean all the conditions that make us possible. All the ideas that make us, the conditions that make us permanent, if you will, that give us some kind of stability. Now, this is the instability of the world saying, maybe it's time to give that up. Maybe it's time to let go. Maybe it's time to fall. But the beauty of a magical, entangling and entangled universe is that in falling, we might be flying without the tyranny of coordinates. We might find ourselves in a different mode of being entirely by adopting decolonial ways of seeing and noticing and sniffing and being in the world. We might find other ways of being alive. And that's my time.